Hey everybody, welcome in. Will Myers with Myers Massage and Bodywork and the Myers Impact team, and welcome back in to Transformation Secrets. Here we're going to go over our second transformation secret, and in my specific order, I really like to go over these first. Remember, the first one was cardio. We're trying to get that metabolism boosted by stimulating your system. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other ways that you can stimulate your metabolism through your nutrition. So based on nutrition, I'm going to show you a couple steps that can help remind you some of the most important things for you to do on a daily basis, on an hourly basis even. So what is my first tip or my first recommendation? Probably what I think is one of the most important parts of nutrition, and that is frequency. So very first, frequency. How often are you eating? A lot of times people will be eating very good and very well and very quote, quote, healthy. However, the frequency is not enough. So regardless, the fuel is not in the tank. So any ideas on how often we should be eating per day? Okay, the bare minimum that we hear all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But with what we're all doing nowadays on a daily basis for the time and the energy that we need, is that enough? So to start, we're looking for 5 to 6 meals per day. Now, you may be thinking, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of times eating. That's a lot of chewing. How am I going to get through that? Well, think about it. 5 to 6 meals per day. If I have to eat 5 to 6 times per day, do you think that's going to be a massive meal? No. The secret with that is they're very small meals. They're very effective meals. The calories are counted if you need to, but the point is we make sure that we have our 3 basic macronutrients in that meal, as well as throwing in some fiber to make sure that we help get everything out. I'll break that down afterwards. So again, frequency, 5 to 6 small meals a day. What is the main purpose of this? We want to boost your metabolism. So if you're going through the day and you're not getting the fuel that you need, your body's going to do what it needs to do and get the nutrients from where it needs to get it. Unfortunately, the only place it can get that nutrients is from your own muscle. So it's going to store fat and burn muscle. So a lot of times that's when people go on a diet, they do lose weight on the scale, but unfortunately they're losing muscle mass and tissue, and that's the last thing you want to lose when you're going on a diet. Just because you see the scale changing does not mean that the body is changing on a composition level. Okay? And in reality, it is even changed on a composition level because you're burning up muscle. You're eating muscle. You're literally metabolizing yourself. I like to think of if I smash legs in the gym and then don't eat for the rest of the day, my body's going to be pulling from other muscle tissue in my body to try to help repair those legs. Okay, we're not winning anywhere. So frequency, 5 to 6 small meals a day. The point of that is to boost your metabolism. Now, what goes in those meals is very important, and it should be completely based on what your goals are. Your metabolism, when we're building out your meal plan, for those that join onto my program and with my team, when I'm building your meal plan, I can give you a generic meal plan, but I'd much rather give you a meal plan that's based on your specific metabolism. So how do I do that? How do I do that? I specifically am looking at the BMR. Basal metabolic rate. In the previous video, you heard me talking about cardio and fasted cardio and what I can do with the metabolism there. There it is again, basal metabolic rate. You see how all this stuff ties in together. So, not to go too deep on that there, frequency, 5 to 6 small meals a day. Now, what are those meals going to consist of? One of the most important things here is we want to limit our processed food intake. Okay? Limit our processed food intake. Why is that important? I like to think processed food is a process to break down. It's more difficult for the body to break down because it wasn't actually made for the body. A lot of these additives and a lot of these substitutes for food are so difficult for our system to use and efficiently actually prosper off of that we're not getting the energy out of the nutrient that we thought we were because it's not real itself. So when we're limiting processed food, we're really trying to make sure that when it comes to blood sugar and we'll say carbohydrates as well, we need to be in control of that. Because as soon as you lose control over the intake of your sugar and carbohydrates, especially because of the high amount and concentration that comes from processed foods, all of a sudden we start messing with the blood. All of a sudden we start messing with the pancreas, because the pancreas needs to now put more insulin out into the body. So have you ever heard of diabetes, type 1, type 2? You ever heard of diabetes onset, people who have actually brought that onto themselves based on their lifestyle choices and the food that they eat? The problem with that there is a lot of times there was too much sugar in the system. We can use glycogen as a fuel source, but if there's too much, the body has to do something to kind of get that equilibrium or find its balance. And unfortunately, that puts a lot of work on one organ, the pancreas. Just like any engine out there, if you overwork it too much, it's going to stop working. So you got to make sure that we're taking care of that pancreas. Limiting those processed foods. So 5 to 6 times a day we're eating. We're limiting the processed food intake, mainly because of all of that excess sugar and carbohydrates that we've got to get out of the blood. Next, we want to watch our fat intake. Now, there's good fat and bad fat, right? You ever heard of the three types of fat? You know those? We've got unsaturated, we've got saturated, and we've got trans. Now, there's a couple other different breakdowns of those, but we're going to stick with those three. The main one I want you to stay away from, trans fat. It's in a lot of that processed food and a lot of those cookies and such. However, our body has a difficult time processing that and breaking that down. So we want no trans fats. And then out of the three, what's the good fat? That's that unsaturated fat. Okay, so we're going to put a yes to unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are also known as, another way you may recognize them, fatty acids or omega-3s. Omega-3s. What's some good examples of omega-3s? Salmon, mackerel, different oils, flaxseed oil, of course, avocado, different types of nuts. When it comes to oils, I try to go to the higher burning temperature oils just because I know it's going to be a better quality. So I'm going to be looking for grapeseed oil, coconut oil, avocado seed oil, trying to stay away from those ones that burn at that 175 degree temperature. The last thing you want is to be cooking your food and burning up the oil before your food is actually cooked. And for those who are working with me, many times we'll use oil as an additional source of extra calories. You got to be careful what type of oil goes in as well, because you want to be able to break it down properly. Okay? So watching that fat intake, no trans fats. We say yes to unsaturated fats. Omega-3s as an example for that. Of course, your omega-3 fatty acids, you've got some of those examples there. It's very important that we watch our fat intake. You can really use fat. What are some of the purposes of fat? You know, when we're looking for fat, we're trying to protect our organs. Okay? We're also using fat to help us absorb vitamins too. And then also fat can be used for energy. So we don't want to say X to fat, no to fat. We just want to be able to process and understand what we should have per meal, how many grams per meal, how many grams per day, what's going to be spilling over. Okay? Watching that fat intake, limiting that processed food intake, and then eating 5 to 6 times a day. We've got our food figured out. Now, how do we get all this stuff to go through the body? How do we pass all these nutrients through the body? That's going to be water. So we really got to pay attention to our water intake. Now, I'm not going to go into how much you should be drinking per day because there's so many different opinions on that, and it really depends on the person. Okay? For professional athletes and professional bodybuilders and anyone who's really playing a sport and sweating a ton, you're going to need to replace that water, right? You're also going to need to replace electrolyte. There's a lot going on. But the main thing is that water is going to help us transport vitamins and minerals throughout the body. It's also going to help replenish the muscles and make sure that the body is hydrated. Unfortunately, if the body is not hydrated, those muscles will not be able to perform at their best because they won't be able to stretch to their best, and they certainly won't be able to produce to their best because there's no water, there's nothing flowing. So when it comes to water intake, I like to really talk about making sure you get your water in, but then also talk about water retention. So what about water that you can't get out? A lot of times we'll be looking into the mirror and we'll be thinking that we're seeing fat, but a lot of times there's water retention. And that water retention after an extended amount of time can then become fat. However, we have an opportunity to burn that and use that through something called carb cycling, through your fasted cardio that we talked about. Basically, you're trying to use that and burn that and make sure that the body has no reason to hold on to any excess water. Carbohydrates, salt, those are things that do actually cause water retention. Alcohol. So you got to be careful when absorbing those substances, mainly because if you're trying to trim, if you're trying to cut, if you're drinking a ton of water, if your body is sensitive to exercise, as soon as you throw off something in your diet like that, your body's going to retain water. It happens so quick, and it can throw you off psychologically because you start to think that you're not having as good results based on that movement. Okay? So water intake, making sure that we're drinking our water all day, of course, every day. What's the main point of that? That's going to help us transport nutrients. Okay? Very, very important. We know how often we're eating per day. We're trying to stay away from the processed food. We're watching our fat intake. We're making sure that we have plenty of water in our system. And then the last but not least, not last, certainly, there's plenty of more, but just to kind of keep it limited for today, I want you to also think about proper supplementation. Now, why do we need to take supplements? A lot of people will say, I don't need to take supplements because I can get the nutrients from my food. And I would agree with that years ago. But unfortunately, the reason that we need to take some form of supplements is because majority of the food that we have access to does not have the nutrients and minerals that we once thought that it did. Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of that fruit, a lot of those vegetables, they're produced in soil that has been used over and over again. They're overproduced themselves. A lot of the fruit and vegetables are taken before they're actually ready, so they didn't have an opportunity to ripen on the vine. They were ripened in temperature-controlled rooms. Okay? All this overproduction, all this mass production, all of this plucking early, all of this pesticides that goes down, all of the toxic waste that our rain is coming through to then water the plants. Unfortunately, this is not the best environment to grow and get the minerals and nutrients that we would hope that everything has. So unfortunately, we do need to do some type of supplementation just to make sure we're getting our vitamins. And then it's very difficult to get minerals, so you got to make sure that you're also doing that as well. Some recommendations, multivitamins that can help you. There's a ton of them out there that you can look at. Very popular also, fish oils. Okay? Potassium, magnesium, different vitamin D, E, K. There's a bunch of different stuff that you can look at, obviously. I would look at simply a multivitamin and then making sure that you're getting in your fish oils. Okay? I've heard many people say when it comes to fish oil, why not just go after the source that the fish goes to? Think about that science, right? The fish is eating that all day long. So that's very effective and very efficient for them. If you don't have access to that, you're going to have to go to the next best part just to be able to get those nutrients and vitamins. So that may end up having to be through a supplementation source. Sometimes convenience is really the key there, and that's really what can help you out. Okay? The last one on here that I really like to add on because I think it's so important is sleep. Now, what does sleep have to do with nutrition? Well, sleep is when we're sleeping, that's when we not only recover, but you also are burning fat at that point in time as well. If your diet is proper, if your training is proper, if everything is working together, when your body is healing and repairing muscle tissue, that metabolism is still going to be cranking. Therefore, you're burning throughout the night. So that means when you go to sleep, it's almost more important than what you did all day. Because you're going to repair and heal yourself. You should be healing while sleeping to then do it all again the next day. So what is the best recommendation I can give you before bed? Making sure that you have a really nice light meal that has its protein in it and then also has fiber. You don't need a whole lot of fat, you don't need a whole lot of carbohydrates before bed, but you do want to fuel your system while it is repairing your tissues and organs. What is the macronutrient that is primarily used for repairing tissues and organs? Protein. Let's actually hit that real quick. But anyway, yeah, so sleep, we'll hit that whole thing. So we got protein. What are the macronutrients? Right? We got protein. We've got carbs. We've got fats. Those are your macros. I always like to throw in fiber too, just even though it's not one of our macros, because it's so important when it comes to building your plate. Really, you need all 4 of these to build your meal, to build a proper plate. So if I'm going to sleep, and I know when I sleep, this is when I recover, this is my primary time of recovery, I want to make sure that while I'm in that state of my day, I have all the fuel that I need for recovery. And think about all the things you need to recover in general. You're going to have to be comfortable in some shape or form. You're going to have to be fed. You're going to have enough water in the system. And you need to just shut it down and rest. So sleep here, very important. However, if we do not have the proper nutrition before we go to sleep, and we're just going to sleep extremely hungry, we're going to be making our body have to do its healing properties overnight with nothing in the system. Now, I understand that there is fasting, and there's a lot of different factors when it comes into fasting. I'm not in any way shooting against fasting. My goal for you, if you were to fast or have questions about fasting, you would just have to be able to answer the question, why? That's simply it. Why do you want to do it? And it's not that you have to prove it to me, but you have to make sure that it makes sense with your fitness routine. If you're fasting at a certain part of the day or a certain time of the month or a certain part of the year, just make sure that you're prepared for that mentally and physically. But for the average individual, we got to make sure that we're getting enough sleep on a regular basis. That's when we recover. So my recommendation would be make sure that you fuel up big time for that recovery. Again, we're not trying to load up on carbs and fats before we go to the bed, but we definitely want to make sure that we have enough protein, and I always recommend get that fiber in to help you get the protein out. So real quick reminders, what is protein? What does it do? I like to think of building blocks. Protein is the building, or the cement blocks, so the brick blocks. That is specifically going to be used for repairing tissues. Okay? We repair tissues here. Tissues and organs. Okay? Really anything that spent time being broken down for the day, the protein is going to help you repair that. Carbohydrates, that's a primary source of energy and fuel. Okay? Fats. What do fats do? Fats are really good for protecting joints. Protection. Thinking literally, just think like insulation, right? Protection also really helps you absorb other nutrients. So we'll just say absorption. And also it's a form of energy. It is a macronutrient that you can burn as fuel. If you've heard of, and one of my talks will do some stuff on energy systems, but if you ever heard of the ketosis or the keto diet, you are actually using fats as a primary fuel source. However, it's really important to make sure that your fitness routine, diet routine, everything makes sense before you jump into something like that. And the last one, of course, fiber. These are your greens, okay? They're going to help you primarily with digestion. Boy, oh boy, we did digestion. Water and fiber is going to help make sure you clear everything out, because a lot of times there is just a ton of waste sitting in the colon that actually hasn't been able to release, and you will feel incredible when you get rid of that. So fiber and water, make sure that you're up to grade on that. Proteins, carbs, and fats. And these, again, are my tips for making sure that your nutrition is on point. Now, when it comes to anyone that works with me in my program, we break this down to a T. Every single one in here, not only do you understand, but you know exactly how it works with your program. Once this is done, then we can start making sure that we can use that fuel. So remember, secret number 1 was going over your fasted cardio and getting that system fueled and going before you actually start moving for the day. Then transformation, our movement number 2, our secret number 2, is now that that system is cranking, let's fuel it, okay? Basically, I taught you how to start the car properly. Now I taught you how to choose the right gas station. And when you get to the gas station, which fuel to choose. I know you've all heard the line, if you only had one car for the rest of your life, how would you treat it? You put the best gas in it, you get it car washed all the time, you'd really take care of it, change the tires, change the oil. The statement is the same. You have one body for the rest of your life. How are you treating it? Especially nowadays when our health is so important. We got to keep our mental health strong, and we really have got to keep our physical health strong. So here's transformation secret number 2. You know number 3 is on its way. Stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.